Frozen before landing. Passenger jet with 214 lives on board. The world below was cloaked in a blanket of winter's fury. A storm brewed across the North Atlantic, its icy winds stretching thousands of miles, curling into blizzards that even satellites struggled to capture in their entirety. In this frozen chaos, Transcontinental Airways Flight 714, a Boeing 777, soared at 35,000 feet, carrying 214 souls on a journey they never expected to become a fight for survival. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere seemed deceptively calm. Children were dozing off, their cheeks pressed against fogged-up windows. Businessmen scrolled lazily through presentations on glowing laptops. A young couple whispered to each other about the new life awaiting them in Boston. To them, this was just another flight. Just another crossing of the ocean. But in the cockpit, Captain Ethan Walker knew better. At 54, with over 25 years of flight experience, Ethan's instincts had been honed to razor sharpness. He had faced turbulence, engine failures, even emergency landings in the past. Yet something about tonight, about the way the storm shifted and pulsed, gnawed at him. Beside him sat First Officer Maria Jensen, only 32 but brilliant, her eyes glued to the instruments. Temperatures dropping faster than expected, she said, tapping the icy readings on the glass panel. We're hitting -65 at altitude. That's unusual. Ethan adjusted his headset. Unusual and dangerous. He reached for the controls, easing the plane slightly south to avoid the worst of the cloud formations. The radio crackled with static. Air traffic control in New York was struggling to keep up with rerouting half the world's planes away from this monstrous weather system. Back in the cabin, a different kind of tension brewed. A passenger named Daniel Reyes, a journalist returning from an overseas assignment, noticed frost beginning to creep along the window's edge. He frowned. Normally, frost at altitude was nothing unusual. But tonight, it spread quickly, almost aggressively, like veins of ice climbing upward. He pulled out his notebook, jotting, "Something strange about this cold, not natural." The flight attendants moved gracefully despite the occasional bump of turbulence. Among them was Claire Monroe, the head attendant, who always carried herself with a quiet confidence. But even she glanced nervously at the windows when she saw the ice building. Hours passed. The outside world had vanished. No stars, no moonlight, only a swirling curtain of white that erased the horizon. The passengers began to sense it too, that something was off. Conversations grew quieter, glances sharper, as if an unspoken truth crept through the aisles. They were at the mercy of forces greater than steel and fuel. Then came the first real sign of crisis. Warning alarms shrieked in the cockpit. "Engine 2. Ice accumulation." Maria shouted. The right side engine's readings spiked, then dipped dangerously. Ethan swore under his breath, activating anti-ice systems, but the frost was spreading faster than the heaters could handle. The entire Boeing shuddered violently. Overhead bins rattled. A baby screamed. Coffee spilled across trays as passengers grabbed for the armrests. Ethan's voice came calm but firm over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing severe weather conditions, but please remain calm. Our crew is trained for situations like this. Keep your seatbelts fastened. We'll keep you updated." His tone was steady, but inside, he knew the truth. the storm wasn't behaving like any normal system. It was colder, denser, almost unnatural. And as the ice began to lock the wings in a crystal grip, Flight 714 edged closer to a nightmare no one on board could yet comprehend. The hum of the engines, once steady and reassuring, now carried a jagged undertone, a harsh growl that vibrated through the metal frame of the Boeing 777. The passengers felt it in their bones, though many pretended not to notice. Fear has a way of creeping silently, like frost crawling across glass. Captain Ethan Walker's hands tightened on the yoke as the aircraft jolted again. The icing alarms blared, red lights pulsing across the cockpit like angry warnings from some unseen god. Engine 2 is losing thrust, Maria announced, her voice trembling despite her training. Anti-ice isn't keeping up. The intake temperature is dropping below tolerance. Ethan cursed under his breath. Keep it stable. Don't let it flame out. They were flying at 34,000 feet, but the storm had turned the sky into a white void. No horizon, no stars, only endless blizzard. It was as if they were flying through a frozen tomb. Meanwhile, in the passenger cabin, unease grew heavier. Claire Monroe, the head flight attendant, walked down the aisle, forcing a calm smile. "It's all right, everyone. Just a little turbulence. Please keep your seatbelts fastened." But she could see it in their eyes. The parents clutching their children tighter, the elderly man whispering prayers under his breath, the young woman biting her lip until it bled. One passenger, Daniel Reyes, the journalist, scribbled furiously in his notebook. "Greater than, this isn't normal turbulence. Ice forming inside the cabin windows. Air too cold. Could the plane actually freeze before landing?" He underlined the last sentence 3 times, as if the act of writing could make sense of the impossible. A few rows away, a teenage boy named Samir pulled out his phone. "No signal," he muttered, panic flickering in his wide eyes. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering in their native Arabic, "It's all right, Habibi. Allah will protect us." But her voice shook, betraying her fear. Back in the cockpit, the situation worsened. "Captain, look at this," Maria pointed. Ice was creeping across the windshield despite the heating systems. Crystalline patterns bloomed across the glass, intricate and beautiful in another context, but deadly here. "We're losing visibility," she said. Ethan adjusted controls, but his gut twisted. He had landed in fog, rain, even near zero visibility, but never with glass literally freezing over from the inside out. Suddenly, the right engine sputtered. The entire plane shook violently. A gasp echoed from the passengers, followed by the shrill cries of children. "Engine 2. Stall," Maria shouted. Ethan slammed switches, rerouting power, engaging restart procedures. The alarms screamed. For a moment, the right engine coughed back to life, but weaker. "Maintain altitude," Ethan ordered. "If we drop below 30,000 in this storm, we're done." Maria's eyes darted to the radar. "We can't hold this course. The storm core is intensifying. If we keep heading east, we'll get swallowed." "Options?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. She hesitated. "We divert south. Greenland's coast is a possibility. But we might not make it," Ethan finished grimly. In the cabin, the tension finally broke. Anxious voices rose. A man in a suit stood up, shouting, "What's happening up there?" Why is the plane shaking like this? Sir, please sit down, Claire said, stepping toward him. But more passengers joined in, their voices overlapping. Is the plane safe? Why are the windows icing? Are we going to crash? Claire raised her hands. Listen to me. The pilots are handling it. Please, remain calm. But even she could feel the lie burning her tongue. The storm roared louder outside, as if mocking them. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating walls of snow and ice. The plane groaned, every bolt and rivet straining against the cold. Daniel, still scribbling notes, suddenly stopped. He stared at the frost crawling along the cabin wall near his seat. The ice wasn't just forming, it was thickening, spreading inward. His stomach dropped. This isn't supposed to happen, he whispered. At that moment, the cabin lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. Gasps erupted. A little girl cried out, and her father hugged her tight. Claire grabbed the intercom. Captain, passengers are panicking. What do I tell them? Ethan's voice came back, clipped and tense. Tell them we're holding steady. Do not mention the engine. But both of them knew the truth. The storm was strangling the aircraft, pulling it deeper into a frozen grip. And as the Boeing fought against nature's fury, 214 lives hung on the edge of a blade of ice sharp enough to cut through steel. The storm outside had grown into a living monster. The Boeing 777 trembled against the roaring winds, a fragile shell of steel and wires trying to carve a path through chaos. Every second was a test of endurance. Every minute stretched into eternity. In the cockpit, Captain Ethan Walker's jaw was locked tight. His hand never left the yoke, his knuckles pale under the strain. Beside him, First Officer Maria Jensen's fingers flew across the panels, adjusting, recalculating, fighting against the impossible. Engine 2 is stabilizing. Barely, Maria reported. But anti-ice systems are at maximum. It's not holding the wings clear. Ethan grunted. If we lose lift on those wings, we don't have a plane anymore. We have a falling coffin. The windshield now carried cracks of frost even across the heated zones. Ethan leaned forward, squinting, as if willing the ice to stop spreading. But it only thickened. He couldn't shake the thought. We're not fighting a storm. The storm is consuming us. Meanwhile, in the cabin, fear had become a contagion. Passengers whispered, prayed, clutched each other. Some stared blankly at the windows, watching the ice crawl closer, as if hypnotized. The air itself seemed colder now, each breath misting faintly, though the heaters still hummed. Claire Monroe, the chief attendant, moved quickly between rows. Her training told her to project calm, but her heart was pounding too hard to hide. She paused by a crying child, kneeling down. Sweetheart, you're safe. You're brave, she whispered, even as turbulence jolted the plane hard enough to rattle overhead bins. The boy clung to her, eyes wide. Are we falling? Claire smiled through the lie. No, honey. Just dancing with the clouds. A few rows away, journalist Daniel Reyes observed everything, every tremor, every whisper, every tear. His notebook filled with frantic scrawls. Greater than 214 people suspended between life and death. Fear spreads like frost on glass. Even the air tastes frozen. His instincts screamed this was bigger than a story. It was history in the making, if they survived to tell it. Then it happened. A deafening bang shook the plane. Passengers screamed. The lights flickered again, dimming for a terrifying 3 seconds before returning. Engine 2. Maria shouted in the cockpit. Warning alarms howled. The right engine's thrust plummeted. Ethan fought the controls, heart hammering. Restart sequence. Now. Maria's hands danced over switches. The engine coughed, sputtered, then fell silent. The Boeing lurched sideways. In the cabin, trays and cups flew. A woman screamed, clutching her baby. Claire grabbed the intercom before panic erupted into chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. The pilots are trained for this. We are safe. Her words were drowned by the roar of wind as the plane shuddered violently again. In row 18, an elderly man clutched his wife's hand. "This is it," he whispered, tears filling his eyes. She shook her head fiercely. "No, we've survived worse. Don't you dare give up now." Nearby, young Samir, the teenager, stared at his powerless phone. "We're going to die without even sending a message," he muttered. His mother kissed his forehead. "Then we pray." In the cockpit, Maria's voice cracked. "Engine 2 is gone. It's iced beyond recovery." Ethan clenched his teeth. "Then we keep her in the air with one. That reduces our range drastically," Maria said. "We can't make Boston. Maybe not even Greenland." Ethan's eyes flicked to the frozen radar screen. "Then find me something. An alternate, an island, a strip of land, I don't care. We don't make it, Maria, unless we land this bird somewhere." Back in the cabin, Daniel Reyes stood suddenly, gripping his notebook. "Listen," he called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Panicking won't save us. If we go down fighting for calm. For each other." Heads turned. Some passengers clung to his words, desperate for hope. Others shouted angrily, "Sit down. You're not the captain." Claire rushed to him, putting a hand on his arm. "Please, Mr. Reyes, stay seated." But Daniel saw something in her eyes, the same fear mirrored back. He nodded slowly and sat, but whispered, "You're holding us together. Don't stop now." Claire swallowed hard. She had never felt such responsibility before. Not just for safety instructions. Not for serving meals. But for keeping 214 hearts beating with hope in the face of death. As the minutes dragged on, ice thickened across the wings. The plane began to vibrate in long, uneven shudders. Ethan felt it through the controls. The Boeing was heavier now, as if the storm was weighing it down, dragging it toward the sea below. "Altitude dropping," Maria reported, panic edging her voice. Ethan's eyes hardened. "We're not giving up this fight." He tightened his grip and muttered, almost to himself. "Not while 214 lives depend on it." And as the storm raged louder than ever, the battle for survival had only just begun. The silence of the failed engine was almost worse than the storm's roar. A Boeing 777 wasn't meant to fly long distances on one engine, not in conditions like these. The storm was eating at the wings, the body, the very spirit of the machine. Captain Ethan Walker gritted his teeth. "One engine. Reduced thrust. I need every ounce of focus, Maria." First Officer Maria Jensen nodded, her eyes darting across panels. "We've lost altitude control. Ice is building faster than we can shed it. If this continues, we'll stall," Ethan finished grimly. Outside the cockpit, The world was a nightmare of white. The wings groaned, coated in a thick armor of ice. Flashes of lightning illuminated the snow-like strobes, each flash a reminder of their fragility. In the cabin, fear was no longer whispered, it was spoken openly. A mother clutched her infant so tightly that the baby cried harder. An old priest led a prayer aloud, his trembling voice echoed by a handful of desperate passengers. Others muttered curses, anger overtaking fear. Claire Monroe, the chief attendant, forced herself to move aisle by aisle, touching shoulders, speaking softly, reminding them to breathe. She could feel their terror seeping into her own veins, but she pushed it back. "If I break, they break," she told herself. Daniel Reyes, the journalist, kept writing. His notebook shook with turbulence, his pen carving frantic words. "Greater than, this night stretches like eternity. We are 214 candles in a storm, flickering, refusing to die out. Some pray, some curse, some fall silent. But all of us are waiting, waiting to know if we live or vanish." The turbulence worsened. The plane dropped. Suddenly, a sickening dive that ripped screams from every throat. Drinks flew. Bags tumbled from overhead bins. "Jesus!" Maria shouted in the cockpit, gripping the console. "Correcting." Ethan barked, forcing the yoke forward, his muscles straining. The plane leveled, but alarms shrieked again. "Ice on left wing now critical," Maria gasped. "If we lose balance, we won't." Ethan cut her off, but his voice was low, almost like a prayer. In the cabin, panic erupted. "Tell us the truth," a man shouted, standing despite the shaking. "We're going to crash, aren't we?" Others joined him, voices rising, fists pounding seatbacks. The fragile order Claire had maintained cracked like the frost on the windows. She grabbed the intercom, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. The pilots are fighting with everything they have. You must sit down. You must trust them. Please. The worst thing we can do right now is give up hope." Her words quieted some, but not all. Fear was too strong, too contagious. Back in the cockpit, Maria found a glimmer of hope. "Captain, I have a possible diversion." Her voice was sharp, urgent. "Southwest course, there's a military airstrip in Greenland. Kangerlussuaq. It's small, but it might take a 777 in emergency." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Might. It's our only chance." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by alarms and the storm's fury. Then Ethan nodded. "Plot it. If we make it, we live. If not," he let the thought die in the storm. The passengers didn't know yet, but the decision was made. They were turning toward Greenland, toward a strip of icy runway barely large enough for their massive plane. Daniel noticed the shift in course, the way the stars, faint and distant, moved differently outside the frost-laced windows. He leaned to the woman beside him, whispering, "We're not heading to Boston anymore." Her eyes widened. "Then where?" Daniel swallowed. "Somewhere that may or may not save us." Hours stretched into forever. The storm refused to loosen its grip. The single engine roared, strained, carrying the weight of 214 lives on its shoulders. The Boeing shuddered, groaned, fought, like a beast wounded but not willing to die. Inside, the passengers began to surrender in their own ways. The priest prayed louder, joined by voices who had never prayed before. The young couple clung to each other, whispering promises in case the end came. Samir, the teenager, scribbled goodbye messages in his phone's notes app, even though there was no signal. And through it all, Claire kept walking the aisles, her presence the only thread holding them together. In the cockpit, Maria whispered, "We'll reach Greenland in about an hour, if the engine holds." Ethan didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the frosted windshield, on the invisible horizon beyond. He spoke only to himself. 1 hour. Just give me 1 hour. And above the frozen world, Flight 714 pushed forward, a wounded bird fighting to land before the storm claimed them all. The storm had followed them like a predator, never loosening its grip. The lone surviving engine groaned with every mile, straining under the weight of a machine built to fly with two. Captain Ethan Walker could feel it, the vibration in the yoke, the uneven thrust, the way the plane wanted to sink. Altitude holding at 29,000, Maria reported, though her voice was tight with fear. But the ice isn't shedding. We're flying heavy, dangerously heavy. Ethan exhaled slowly, steadying himself. We make it to Greenland. We have no other option. The cockpit windshield was now more ice than glass. The heated panels worked only in patches, leaving small circles of visibility, like peering through a fogged bathroom mirror. Beyond, the storm still screamed, blinding, endless. In the cabin, the atmosphere was no longer panic alone. It was something deeper, a collective awareness that every passenger was staring into the possibility of their own death. Claire Monroe had walked the aisles so many times she could barely feel her legs anymore. She stopped beside an old woman clutching a rosary. "Do you need anything?" Claire asked softly. The woman looked up, tears brimming. "Just tell me the truth. Are we going to live?" Claire froze. She wanted to lie, to soothe, but the words stuck. Instead, she knelt, holding the woman's hand. "I don't know, but I promise you, we will fight until the last second." The woman nodded, squeezing her hand as if holding on to that single promise. Daniel Reyes, the journalist, could no longer write. His pen trembled too much. Instead, he closed the notebook and stared out the frosted window. His reflection stared back, pale, tired, human. "If this is the end, what do I leave behind?" he thought. His stories, his words, they seemed small now compared to the magnitude of this fight for survival. Across the aisle, Samir, the teenager, leaned toward him. "Mister, do you think we'll make it?" Daniel hesitated, then forced a smile. "We'll either make history, or become it." The boy chuckled nervously, but somehow, that small moment of shared humor eased the weight. Suddenly, the plane lurched. The single engine coughed, its roar dipping into silence for half a breath. The entire Boeing shuddered violently, dropping altitude fast. Gasps, screams, prayers filled the cabin. Maria's voice cut sharp in the cockpit. Engine 1 losing stability. Ethan's hands tightened. "No, you don't. You're all we've got." He rerouted fuel, engaged emergency procedures, his knuckles bone white on the controls. The engine sputtered, and roared back. The cabin exploded in relieved sobs and whispers of, "Thank God." But the fear was deeper now. If this last engine failed, there would be no second chance. "Radar contact with Greenland," Maria finally said, her voice cracking with relief. "We're within range. 20 minutes to approach. Ethan's jaw clenched. 20 minutes in this storm is a lifetime. But it was something. A chance. In the cabin, Claire picked up the intercom. Her voice trembled at first but grew stronger. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing to divert for an emergency landing. Please keep your seatbelts tight and remain calm. The pilots are doing everything possible to get us safely on the ground." A silence followed. Not calm, but heavy. Passengers exchanged glances, gripped hands, whispered prayers. The reality was clear. The next half hour would decide everything. Daniel Reyes closed his eyes. In his mind, he replayed every story he had ever written, every place he had been. None of it mattered now. What mattered was the sound of strangers breathing beside him. 214 lives bound together in one fragile machine. And as the storm raged around them, the frozen world of Greenland waiting below, Flight 714 prepared for the most dangerous landing of its existence. The blizzard showed no mercy. Greenland's coastline was somewhere ahead, hidden beneath endless walls of white. The Boeing 777, battered and ice-choked, pushed forward on a single, straining engine. In the cockpit, Ethan's voice was steel. "Approach vectors locked. Maria, get me the runway coordinates." Maria's hands trembled as she entered the data. "Runway 09, Kangerlussuaq. It's only 9,200 feet long. Captain, this aircraft wasn't built for strips like that." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Tonight it is." The radar blinked faintly, cutting in and out. For seconds at a time, they were flying blind. Ethan leaned closer to the windshield, peering through tiny heated patches of glass. The rest was a frosted wall. "Altitude 22,000, Maria said. "We need to start descent in 10 minutes. Ethan nodded. "God help us." In the cabin, the mood was almost surreal. Passengers sat in heavy silence, broken only by muffled sobs or whispered prayers. Claire Monroe stood at the front, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning descent. Please make sure your seatbelts are fastened. Put away everything. This will be a hard landing. Please." Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. "Please stay strong." Her eyes swept the cabin. Parents kissed their children. Strangers held hands. A businessman whispered into his phone's recorder, "To my family, if I don't make it," before breaking into sobs. Daniel Reyes, notebook on his lap, wrote his final line. "Greater than, if this plane touches ground tonight, it will be nothing short of a miracle." The descent began. The storm clawed at the Boeing, pushing it sideways, forcing Ethan to fight the yoke with every ounce of strength. Warning alarms blared in waves. "Stall, altitude, ice detection critical." "Speed's dropping too fast," Maria warned. "Ice on the wings is killing lift." "Flaps won't deploy fully if frozen," Ethan muttered. "We're landing hot." The plane bucked, shuddering as if trying to tear itself apart. Passengers screamed as overhead bins flew open. Bags and belongings tumbled into the aisles. Claire and her crew clung to the jump seats, their knuckles white. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Hold together. Just hold." "Altitude 8,000, Maria shouted. Ethan's eyes flicked between failing instruments. "Where's my runway?" "It's there. Somewhere below this storm." Suddenly, lightning split the clouds, and for a single moment Ethan saw it. A faint line of runway lights glowing weakly through the snow, like stars sinking into the earth. "There," Ethan barked. "I've got visual. Course correction 2 degrees left," Maria said. "Watch the crosswind. 25 knots." Ethan wrestled the yoke, sweat dripping despite the freezing air. The Boeing tilted, groaning in protest. In the cabin, the screams built to a crescendo as the nose dipped lower. Frost-covered windows showed nothing but swirling white. For the passengers, it felt like they were falling into an abyss. Daniel gripped the armrest, his knuckles pale. Beside him, Samir clutched his mother's hand. "I don't want to die, Mama," he cried. She held him close, whispering prayers into his ear. "Altitude 2000," Maria yelled. The runway lights flickered through the storm, a thin strip of salvation. Ethan's voice dropped to a growl. "Brace for landing." Maria activated the cabin announcement. "Brace. Brace. Heads down. Stay down." Claire repeated the command, her voice fierce as she crouched. Passengers bent forward, arms over heads, screams mixing with sobs and prayers. The Boeing descended hard, shuddering violently. Ice cracked across the wings as flaps half deployed, struggling against frozen joints. The single engine screamed at maximum thrust, its howl echoing like a final cry of defiance. "Speed 170, Maria shouted. "Too fast. It's the only way we stay in the air." Ethan snapped. The runway loomed closer, glowing faintly in the storm, the only line between survival and death. Ethan's hands locked on the yoke, his voice a whisper now. "Come on, girl. Don't give up on me." And then, the wheels slammed down. The impact shook the aircraft like an earthquake. Sparks sprayed as frozen tires skidded against ice. The Boeing fishtail-ed wildly, alarms blaring. Passengers screamed as oxygen masks fell from the ceiling. Ethan fought the rudder, his body straining as the aircraft wobbled across the short runway. Maria shouted numbers. Speed 150. 130. Still too fast. The end of the runway loomed, a black void waiting to swallow them. Ethan roared, "Reversers, now!" Maria slammed the controls. The engine howled, the brakes screeched, the plane vibrated with a deafening roar. The runway lights blurred past. The snow swallowed everything, and as the final seconds stretched into eternity, 214 lives prayed for a miracle. The jet thundered down the ice-slicked runway, skidding, screaming, fighting against physics itself. Sparks lit up the snowstorm as landing gear scraped uneven asphalt. The entire fuselage rattled, each vibration threatening to tear the plane apart. "Reverse thrust maxed," Maria shouted. Brakes failing. Ethan's eyes locked on the end of the runway. Darkness, a sheer drop into frozen wilderness. "Hold on," he barked. The aircraft fishtail-ed violently, throwing passengers against their belts. Overhead bins cracked open, belongings showering down. A child's doll rolled across the aisle, its glassy eyes staring upward. In the cabin, passengers screamed in one voice. "God help us. Brace. Brace." Claire clung to her jump seat, teeth clenched so hard her jaw ached. She thought of her family back home and whispered, "Let me see them again." Daniel Reyes, notebook pressed against his chest, felt tears burning his eyes. His final words raced in his head. "The story ends if we don't." The speed was dropping. 140, 120, 100 knots. Yet the runway end raced closer, faster, unstoppable. "Captain, we're out of runway," Maria screamed. Ethan's veins throbbed. He slammed the rudder, yanking the nose left toward the safety strip. Not yet. The plane screeched, skidded sideways, snow exploding in clouds as rubber shredded. For one horrifying moment, the Boeing tipped, leaning dangerously toward its wing. Passengers shrieked. Metal groaned like a dying beast. And then, the wheels caught traction. The nose swung straight. The brakes screamed one last time. The Boeing jolted to a bone-breaking stop, 20 feet from the runway's edge. Silence. For a moment, no one dared breathe. Snow fell softly against the trembling fuselage. The engine sputtered, then died. And then, like a wave breaking, screams erupted into cheers. Passengers wept, hugging strangers, kissing children, raising their hands to heaven. Claire unbuckled, tears streaming as she shouted down the aisle, "We made it. We're alive." Samir, the little boy, sobbed into his mother's arms. She rocked him gently, whispering, "Shish, it's over, it's over." Daniel, shaking, scribbled one final sentence in his notebook. "Greater than, on a frozen night when death spread its wings, 214 souls were spared." In the cockpit, Ethan leaned back, chest heaving. His hands shook violently on the yoke. He closed his eyes for a second, whispering, "Thank you." Maria exhaled, tears in her eyes. "Captain, that was impossible." Ethan gave a hollow laugh. "No, just barely possible." They exchanged a look. Two people who had seen death's shadow, and pulled 200 others back from it. Outside, emergency lights flashed as ground crews rushed through the storm. The frozen jet, scarred and battered, stood like a ghost in the snow. But inside, hearts beat stronger than ever. 214 lives. One miracle. Frozen before landing. The end.